Welcome to Bid Nerds, everybody. Thanks for spending an hour or half hour, however long this show is, with us of your day talking about the most interesting car from all the automotive enthusiast auction sites. My name is John Polnik, along with my partner, Michael Deeb. How are you, Michael Deeb?
Ooh, I'm good, man. I'm sorry I'm lagging today. There's something wrong with my connection, but I'm just happy to be on the show, JP. What's going on?
You know, in earlier revs of our show, we always had audio problems. Visually, it's terrible because it's really my face and your face. So do you really want it to be high resolution 4K, or is it just better that, you know, maybe our faces aren't coming in as clearly as they could? But your voice is coming in clear, so we're glad to be able to hear you. What we do on this channel is we talk about the most interesting car of the day from all these auction sites. We have a conversation about that car. That's what makes the car most interesting. It's not that it's the most rare or most expensive or something. It's something about that car inspires us to have a conversation about it. And we get to the fun part, which is making a prediction as to what will happen with that car's auction results. And then we reconcile our predictions with what actually happened. So in the middle of the show, we go into the future and we marry our predictions with the results. And you can play along with us. It's like The Price is Right, only with cars instead of washing machines. And interesting cars, right? So let's go for it.
Yeah.
Let's get to the most interesting car of the day. But before we do, we should probably mention our good friends where, Michael Deeb?
At Godden Porsche of Las Vegas. They are the very first Porsche Classic partner in North America. They are experts on all things classic. They can handle you with your parts, your service, and they even have classic cars for you to buy. Call our friends at Godden Porsche and tell them the Bid Nerds sent you.
That is correct. Okay, what is the most interesting car of the day today, Michael D?
JP, let's go Volkswagen. Bring a Trailer has a 2004 Volkswagen R32. JP, that's a Mark IV, am I right?
That is correct, sir.
A Mark IV. This is the ultimate Mark IV Volkswagen. If you are like me, that's what I think. Our car is offered on Bring a Trailer out of Ellenville, New York. And here's where it gets interesting, John. Our car is showing 97 miles, just 97 miles, not 97,000, 97 miles. So, JP, I picked this car because I remember how upset you were about that Porsche 911 Sport Classic that we covered on Doug DeMiro's site last week, because the car had only like 385, 386 miles on it. In other words, they hadn't even put a second tank of gas in the car yet. This car has less than 100 miles. And I know it's going to bother you because the idiot that buys this car is never going to drive it. JP, our car was offered for sale at Jack Daniels Motors in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, but the car was dealer traded to a different dealer, and that dealer kept it until it was acquired by the seller in 2020. So this car was on its original MSO, I think, up in just until about 2 or 3 years ago, and probably just registered for the first time. The car has less, it's got 3 miles under 100. And JP, I bet that the new owner is going to fight to keep this car under 100 miles, thinking that there's some significant bump in value because it's a sub 100-mile car rather than just a sub 1,000-mile car. But in all cases, I think this car is going to break the bank. The R32 has aged really well. All the newer cars, all the newer versions of the Golf R and R32, they went to forced induction and smaller motors. This car has a real neat appeal with its normally aspirated V6, the really throaty dual exhaust. Remember when you're on overrun, this car has a real great backfire to it. The cars all incorporate Haldex all-wheel drive system, and I love the beautiful Aristo 18-inch wheels that are on the car. Remember the big, heavily bolstered Koenig seats. There's really neat equipment on this car. I don't think Mark IVs are anything to write home about, but I always thought this car was super, super cool. JP, did I ever tell you the story? I was on Nob Hill at my garage, and I saw 4 R32s and an Audi drive by, all in matte black taped out stuff. And then they came back and they parked like a block away from me. So I walked down to see what the cars were. And I started talking to one of the engineers from Volkswagen that was testing the car. And he mentioned how the car had a V6 all-wheel drive and a dual clutch transmission. And so he invited me to take the car for a drive. So while Volkswagen was testing the car before they went into production, and I believe the Audi also had the same drivetrain with the dual clutch transmission, I got to take the car down into North Beach and blast through the Broadway tunnel and back up onto Nob Hill. I probably drove the car about 2 or 3 miles.
Wait, those were
and
Mark
he asked,
Fives?
Mark IVs. It was before this car came out.
Yeah, I don't think any of these had a DSG. I don't think the DSG came out until the Mark Fives.
Right, but at the same time Audi dropped the TT, and the TT did get the
got
DSG.
it. Okay, all right. So
And
it wasn't
so
in the.
I
okay,
drove.
sorry, my bad.
I drove a test mule with the dual clutch transmission, and I got to drive it through the thing. And he said, "Do you think the Volkswagen community would want this gearbox?" And I said, "Yes, but they would also want the manual too. You should deliver both." And he said, "But if you had to choose one," and I said, "I think the DSGs. If it's a faster shift than a person can do, I think the guy who buys this car would love all the gadgets, and I think you should launch it with that gearbox." That was my opinion in 2003 when they were testing the car. So it was just really fun for me to whatever insignificant part I played in getting to drive the test mule before the car went into production. So I've always had a soft spot for this car. And believe it or not, I was at
a significant role in perpetuating a scum transmission with 2 pedals.
Yes.
How could you?
Yes, I
Who are you?
I know, because I'm
sorry I'm interrupting, but this. I am crushed by this. I thought you were a man of God. You were a man of the devil.
I said both. Do you remember driving a TSG for the first time?
I do.
How fast the gearbox is. It was badass. I was like, dude, this is really cool. Like I said, I think the kids would like the gizmos on that, for sure.
From a market point of view, you're right, but you're gross.
Yeah, it's the antithesis, right? Who knew that ICE engines were going to go away? We should have treasured them more while they were there. I mean, at least we're on the right side of history, JP. Trust me. But I was with Volkswagen and Audi when these cars hit the market too. At the time that I test drove it, I wasn't. I can't believe I didn't buy one for myself. They were probably just a teeny bit more than I could afford at like $30,000 or $32,000 back in 2004. That was a lot of money for me. I really wanted one, but I didn't buy one. But I got to drive the snot out of them. I sold a few of them to customers, and they loved them. Really, really great little cars. And like I said, they've aged well. I think this one's going to break the bank. So I'm going to give it back to you, John. I'm very verbose. But I think the number that this one brings is going to make people just go absolutely bonkers. What was the car we covered recently that Volkswagen GTI that brought $80,000?
The 92, there was a Mark II that went for $87,000. And that thing had 50,000 miles on it. This car has less than 100. I mean, this car
is going to break the bank. That's why I covered it. It's going to bother you.
It bothers me that it hasn't been driven and it's just going to wind up in a museum. It is weird that it's like in some driveway. This car is a museum piece and it's
lot.
like in a dirt lot with, it doesn't even look like you said they bought it in 2020.
Yeah, the seller bought it in 2020.
They're going to make some money on this thing because 2020 things were not selling for that. It depends on when in 2020, but they probably stole this thing relative to what it's worth now. It's of an era, though. I don't think that this car will it bring as much as that Mark II. I don't know. I'm
spoiler alert. Before you go on a tangent, just so you know, it closes in 4 days, John.
Yeah.
It's sitting at $75,000 as we're
I guess
talking
it is
about
then. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So go ahead with your thought, but I don't want you to go on a tangent about you don't think it'll bring the money. It's already bringing the money.
It's already there. It's weird because I would think a Mark II. I'd way rather have the Mark II over this car. If money weren't a factor. This is the better car, but I'd rather have the Mark II, and I think that's what drives the Mark II is the nostalgia factor. This car isn't old enough to be as nostalgic yet.
Yet it's 20 years old this year, right? Because we're going to start selling 2024s in a few months. This car is basically 20 years old. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So, what drives the market? It's guys in their 40s with money. So those are for real, right? It's guys 40s, 50. Yeah. In your early 40s, you're still paying off the house or your kids are going to college or whatever. So you don't really have the disposable income. You may be able to afford to go get something like this, but it doesn't quite fit into your over. You got to get a couple things done first. It isn't really until you're in your 50s or your 60s that you can start going back and buying that thing that you wanted when you were your teen or in your 20s. So that's why I'm saying this car, it's not quite there, but it's so low miles and it is a collector item. I mean, you're not going to find a car, an R32 in this kind of condition. So yeah. I mean, you're right. It's going to bring some big money. My buddy, his teenage kid has one. He bought one for him. It has a lot more miles on it, but he just burned the crap out of it when he drove it off the road a couple weeks ago. But
we were talking about that
driving,
the other day,
I think it's the same color and everything, but you know, they bought that car. He bought that car for him 3 years ago, something like that, for like 12 grand for an R32.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
You know, so that makes sense for a kid. But this car no longer is in the realm of a kid's car. They're buying the Mark 5s and Mark 6s with DSGs for 10 grand or something like that.
Yeah, I think this car came in like 3 or 4 colors. It was like tornado red, this blue metallic. I think it came in like a black metallic, and it might have come in a silver. I can't.
Yeah, it was a silver one. I've only ever seen a blue and a silver one. I've never seen one in another color.
Yeah, I sold a red one. I think the first one I sold was a red one. And I think I sold like 3.
It's funny that the WRX STI was out at the same time, and you had that same kind of Subaru blue, because that was kind of the rally thing was happening.
The rally thing, and then the Mitsubishi came out with the Evo, right? The Lancer Evolution, and their color was blue Bayou, like the Bayou in the South, but if you say it, it's Blue Bayou, right? Like I Blue Bayou. I thought that was a really great double entendre for the color. Shout out to Mitsubishi. If you don't know how to make cars, at least you know how to make marketing. But anyway.
The R32 is just such a great looking little hot hatch. I never liked the WRX. I never liked the Evo Mitsubishi, because they were just so boy racer with so many doodads and wingdings, and they just looked like a regular piece of crap sedan with a bunch of shucks auto supply stuff bolted to it.
You're so right. The 3 cars were always compared to one another because they were like the hot econo boxes, the subcompacts that were, theoretically cars a kid could afford. And the Volkswagen, even though it made less power, was always referred to as the man and like the adult in the room in the company of those other 2 cars because of a lack of wings and the boy racer stuff. And I think that still stands today. This is a handsome little car. I've always really liked it. I've never owned one, but they are kind of fun to drive and they sound really good. So JP, when I picked this car, it was sitting at $70,000 on 13 bids. At the moment, it's at $75,000 on 14 bids. And when I looked at it originally, it was at like 40 grand when I first saw it. And I was like, this car's going to break the bank. So I'm going to stick to my original bid, John. I think this car's going to bring $100,000. And again, that number doesn't make sense. There's nothing to compare it to, but I just feel like where else are you going to find it? Since we've been doing the show, I've never seen a 0 mile R32 in the most popular color, that blue. I just think this is, if you're going to put one away, this is the one, and it's on the right platform. And the guy who buys it doesn't care about interest rates, and he's not going to drive it. I don't think this car will ever get 100 miles on it. I think it'll be flatbedded everywhere for the rest of its life, and that makes me sad, but I think that's what's going to happen here. I'm saying this car is going to go all the way to 100 grand. It's got, just so you know, John, it's got 4 days until it closes. So what do you think?
Yeah, man, I'm with you. It's going to bring big money to the point where I'm going over.
Oh!
You took my number, and I'm going over by $32.
That's good. I like it.
$132. That's what I think. $100,032, not 100. 132, but $100,032.
$32.
It's crazy that an R32, that any Volkswagen is going to break 100 grand. But yeah, look, is there a Volkswagen? Let me rephrase that. Is there a hatchback that you, as a 50-something-year-old guy, would own and drive? I mean, like the Ford Focus RS or whatever is a highly capable car and arguably better than the Volkswagen Golf R, but it looks stupid. You have to be like someone like Matt Farah, who has no aesthetic ability whatsoever. That guy has the worst taste ever. He's the kind of guy at our age that would buy something like that and be seen in it.
Well, and that car makes so much noise that, like, from a noise, vibration, and harshness, like, that's a terrible car. Our good friend Ben, shout out to the professor, he rocks a couple of generation old Golf
Yeah,
R,
Golf
and that's
R,
a
yeah.
really nice car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice car. It's a subtle metallic black. You know, the wheels on it are about the only thing that gives it away that it's a little bit special car because it's a little bit taller wheel and a little bit lower profile. But like that's a really nice car, and it's not a boy racer color like this one is. So I still like, even though you can, you know, contest that the Gen 7 or the Mark 7 or the Mark 8 are bad cars, I still like the Golf R as, you know, from a practical standpoint. If you live in a city and you need to be able to parallel park, I think it's a great utilitarian car, and I wouldn't mind owning one. I just don't need one, so I don't have one, you know?
When I got my Macan GTS, I basically got in and says, this thing's like a big GTI, really.
Yeah.
But I wanted
And
a
you
Golf
drive it
R.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my wife was like, no, she didn't want to be in a hatchback. She couldn't
Right.
get her brain around it, and she drives the car occasionally too. So it was like, all right, that's why I stepped up. But honestly, in hindsight, I wish I hadn't listened to her. I wish I had just gotten a Golf R. I would have saved a bunch of money and gotten a car that, you know, I could have got it with a stick. That's the thing. You can't get a Macan with a stick. You can get a 3-pedal
Golf yeah.
R.
6-speed. Yeah.
So,
I stuck my wife and now our baby and our dogs in a Cayenne diesel, but my wife complains all the time about missing my old Audi S6 wagon, which is basically a Golf R long wheelbase, you know, like an executive. And that's all it really was.
and a
but it's
slush
low
box
to the ground.
transmission. I mean,
And a
let's
slush
be
box,
honest, it's not
terrible,
a BST,
terrible gearbox.
Yeah.
But you know, the all-wheel drive and the practicality of a hatchback, I felt like that's what we had, even if it didn't have the manual. That's another car, by the way. A lot of people do the 6-speed swap on. Is they retro the 6-speed into those S6s. Make nice
That's
cars.
a whole other episode. Check out our episodes on the Supra 6-speed swap and the F430 swap. Yeah. All right, guys, what do you think of this no mileage, not low mileage, this no mileage Volkswagen R32? Is it going to bring the big money? Are we off? Is it going to bring even more? Are we now in an era where Volkswagen hatches are finally bringing the big money after years of just languishing in the shadow of Porsches? Now is the time to plug in your bid and see if you are better at predicting auction results than the bid nerds. Do it now.
Mark.
Play along. Hit the subscribe, like, and notification button, and we are going to find out what happened with this car's auction right after this. See you in just a minute. Hey guys, I gotta tell you about our friends Godden Porsche of Las Vegas and Godden Classic. If you're looking for a new Porsche or a classic, you gotta call our friend Steve at Godden. This guy.
1989 linen gray metallic G50 cab.
Is that gonna be for sale?
It is going to be for sale. The car only has 65,000 miles.
Save yourself the hassle of screwing around with all the auctions like we always talk about and just talk to Steve. He'll find you the classic Porsche you're looking for. Godden Porsche of Las Vegas.
If you love watching car videos on YouTube, you gotta check out my channel, The Rami Show. Oh, this car! I am driving a 2020 Lamborghini SVJ. This car, watch this. Oh! 115 mile an hour turn like it's nothing.
Our boy Rami. Have you guys checked out the Rami Show yet? Come on. If you haven't done it already, make sure you get over there and hit the subscribe and like over there, as well as hitting subscribe and like here. The Rami Show is our sister channel where we do weekly car reviews. They're not like Doug DeMuro where we stand behind an old, bombed out Kmart in front of a supercar and just point out stupid plastic stuff. We actually get out and drive it and have a great time. And boy, that's a fun show to make. Check out the show, the Rami Show channel on YouTube. Welcome back, everyone. You are here for the results of the most interesting car of the day, which happens to be a really, really darn nice Volkswagen R32. Boy, these GTIs and Golfs they're having a moment. Michael Deeb, what are the results of this little bluester?
JP, I am so mad that I didn't win this lot. I can't even tell you. So, to quickly review, I guessed $100,000, and then you agreed with me and took the over and gave us a bid of $100,032, and it really bothered me because when I gave you my number, our car was only sitting at 70,000 bucks, and I thought I would drop the hot take and say, this is a six-figure car because it's a 97-mile 2004 R32. But JP, you took the over, and I was so angry. And then you went ahead and won because our car sold on BAT for $104,000. 38 bids is what it took. That was our high bid count of the week for all the cars we did that week. But 104,000, I can't believe you took the over on my number and won that one. I thought for sure you would scoff at my $100,000 take and go 85 grand. And that certainly wasn't the case at all. So, congratulations. You took the smart high road over me, and well done by the seller. I don't know how you own a car like that and not drive it. They're still too damn fun to just sit in the garage and let it collect dust. But that must have paid dividends. Even when you account for interest, JP, this guy still made money. Unless he had to pay to store it. If he paid to store it for the last 20 years, then he didn't make a dime. But there you go, JP. Six-figure R32. Are you shocked by that or no?
Nah, I mean, with that kind of miles and with the way things are going, it seems like, I know you get the question all the time. People are, we're the nerds. Everyone knows that we're the bid nerds. And so we're constantly being asked to give our opinion on, the value of cars. And I don't know why, because we're never right. This one, I was very confident when you hit me with that six figure, nice and even six. I was worried that you were going to come in at like 105 or 110. Because I was like, yeah, you know what? This one's going to break 100, but barely. When I saw it like go above 100, I was casually watching it. I was like, uh-oh, this could be one of those where it just like really keeps going. Could this make $110? Could this make $120? But, I suspected it originally. That's why, being cute with a little $32 was seemed like the way to go.
I thought for sure when I took 100 grand, you would be like, no way. And I'd have everything above it. And then you went 100,032. And I was like, oh,
come on,
no.
Man.
I'm like, damn it.
You were in a tough position. Well, the question I have out there for all of our nerd herds isn't just what you think of the results of this car, but really it's going to be interesting to watch the values of these Mark IV R32s that have more realistic miles.
Sure.
What does one with 75 or 80,000 miles, what just happened to the value of those? Typically the rising tide raises, all the boats.
Right. It's a good take. Did it just go from a $29,000 car to a $39,000 car because one of these sold for 100 grand? That's a pretty good question.
Because, I know people that have them. And we were talking about before the break, a very good friend of mine, he bought one of these for his teenager, back when they weren't that expensive. Now the idea of a teenager driving around a car that he bought for maybe $12,000, we've assumed that it's appreciated. Maybe we thought it was worth 20 or something like that. But now is his teenager driving around and literally crashing a $50,000 car? Do you basically take the car back from him and go, all right, let's go get you something else that you're not gonna? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What would you do if you had a teenager in a car that just became a really valuable collector car?
Yeah, pull it in put it in an IRA account, like take the equity out and put it in a Roth. Or I don't know. It's like kind of funny to think of what you could do with that money. You could pay for college, but. That's a really good take. I do think that a result like this, because it's so public, BAT gets so much attention that it does bring up the values of other cars. People are watching and paying attention. And the thing that I'm happiest about, John, is that, and you may recall this from just doing the show last year. How many times did I there's a manual Rabbit convertible. Let's review it because we don't see enough Volkswagens. Well, a couple of Rabbit convertibles brought $30,000, and now we see GTI 2 liters bringing 75, 80 grand, and an R32 just broke $100,000. If this bring more Volkswagens to the platforms, that'll make me happy because underneath it all, I've always loved the VW brand, and I still want that Calypso green, Jetta 16 valve GLI. That's the car I'm waiting for to land on my lap.
You'll be the second to know. We talked about in an earlier episode this week about that 350Z, that touring car that had really low miles.
Track.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
Track. So
Yeah.
much I care about Datsuns. And in that episode, honestly, that car will never be something called a great car. That car was never, it's not one of the greats. These Volkswagens, a front wheel drive, hot hatch R32 that doesn't have as much horsepower as that 350Z, that by the numbers on, all the normal metrics that you look at to, gauge whether or not a car is good or not. The 350Z definitely beats this car on all the metrics, but not in reality. Who wouldn't rather have an R32 over a 350Z? And it's interesting being that they're kind of this, I think they're the same year, right? That 350Z track edition had only 12,000 miles on it. Is that right?
Yep. 03, 12,000 miles, couldn't break 20 grand. And this 100-mile R32 from 04 brought $100,000.
Well, so that's a good comparison, right? So let's say this car actually had 12,000 miles on it. So now it's it's not this super hermetically sealed car. I don't think a 12,000 mile R32 would necessarily break $100,000. Clearly,
no.
But
it would have broke 60.
Definitely break 20, and it would probably be more like 60, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
$65,000.
Yeah, that's my bid. Yeah, for sure. Yep,
so it's literally, this is truly a great car, and it's definitely something that someone, and I think I said about that 350Z was that car didn't land in a window that's really nostalgic yet, right? That car hasn't benefited from, people that were that age can now afford it. This particular car, I don't know, there's something different about the Volkswagen Heritage that we haven't really seen valuations of cars get realized, or values, coming up being realized until right about now. And is that because there is something more nostalgic about this car, or is it simply that it's just a better car and the nostalgia isn't really what's making this thing worth so much? It's the fact that it's just a fantastic freaking car, and there aren't that many of them out there. And if you're literally in that, $70,000-$80,000 range, what else do you get that can compare with something like this?
Yeah, that's all good questions, John. I mean, it's provocative. You look at this and you just start thinking like, wow, R32s are bringing collector money now, and a beautiful 350Z with a rare package on it, can't even bring respectable used car money. And so as we think back to that 350Z track, do you not start to think, okay, maybe just maybe the platform had something to do with that particular result? I still do. That's why we argued about it on that particular show.
Yeah, but even if you're a 100% right and the real valuation of that car is 30, we bid it, I bid it at 20, or it only made it up to 20, right? You say it's worth 30. Okay, fine. That's still nowhere near what this car's worth. This car's worth double, or an R32 with the same miles would worth at least twice
double
as much. And that has to be something to do with nostalgia, because I'll answer my own question that I just asked, because I'm like, what do you get for, that kind of money that can perform as well as this car? Well, I'll tell you what you get: a new R32. They're only 40 or 50,000 bucks, or a GTI or whatever. The new version of this car is demonstrably better by the numbers, and isn't that much different, and is as fun to drive, and is definitely going to be something that you'd call a great car. Our friend Ben, the professor, drives one as his daily driver.
100% more practical.
But
with the hatchback.
The Mark IV is the car that is bringing big money. I mean, geez, that's something. What do you guys think of the results of this R32? Would you pay $100,000 for a collector car that you're not going to really be able to drive, because the value of this is all about the 100 miles on it? Or is this something that you're like, I'd pay all that money because now I can drive it and not worry about it getting into a maintenance schedule or something like that? I don't know. Let us know in the comments below. I mean, let's be honest, Mark IVs were not the most reliable of eras for Volkswagens. Mark IVs are known to have a lot of little, check engine lights and stuff like that. I bet a car like this,
John,
you have to bring in and get it updated.
John, it's 100% reliable if you never drive it.
Yeah, that's true, right? I don't know. Unless you try to drive it from this guy's driveway to the truck that it's going to get on to be shipped to wherever museum it's going.
Thank God it doesn't have a timing belt.
Thank you guys so much for the comments that you've been leaving. We really enjoy reading those, and often we regret that we couldn't add our fans' takes to the actual episodes, because so often it's being proven that the people that watch this show know way more than we do. So thanks for contributing to the conversations, and we'll hopefully in the future be able to use that learned knowledge in another conversation about the most interesting car of the day. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. What do you think of that, Michael Deeb?
Let's do it tomorrow.
Good.
No!